Jeremiah Johnson is a Pennsylvania-based artisan, painter, and educator. He was raised on a fruit and flower farm in north-central Pennsylvania. He received his BFA from Tyler School of Art of Temple University before going on to get his MFA in print, paper, and book arts from Syracuse University. Johnson's work is included in several collections both regionally and internationally, including the State Museum of Pennsylvania, the Taubman Museum of Art in Roanoke, Virginia, and the Servais Collection in Brussels Belgium. Johnson manages a Makerspace at Penn College, teaches drawing and printmaking at Lycoming College, Bucknell University, and Bloomsburg University, and works with his wife in their studio making art about culture, folklore, and survival. The NGUYEN Johnson Company is the cross-cultural collaborative team of Jeremiah Johnson and wife, Duyen. Together they synthesize material from fashion, pop culture, folklore, and mysticism, making multi-layered maximalist paintings, drawings, and prints. The Job Johnson Project is directly based on the oral and written stories of life here in north-central Pennsylvania, as told through the drawings done by an alter ego named Job Johnson, who lived at the beginning of the industrial era, from 1860 to 1937. He can be found on Instagram at Jeremiah Johnson Art, that's JEREMIAH JOHNSONART, or his website, jeremiahjohnsonart.com.
Hello there. How are you doing, Jeremiah?
Hey.
That's one of your originals?
No, this is my wife's actually. She makes the masks. It's her company. It's Eva Vintage Fashion. Yeah.
So we met initially, I think because you were pulled into the first burlesque show that I did via your wife at the time, Jen. Is that right? Yeah. You and Jen were not going to be a couple for that much longer after that.
Yeah, we had a wild relationship.
So, like a very tumultuous time of life for like trying to help people out and being helped out, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, in a way. I mean, there were a lot of things going on. The great thing about Williamsport is we all just simply come together and we do our own things. We're all very independent about it. So when you have ideas and stuff, they kind of, you get all these people that participate, and then it sort of gets all crazy and explodes again. And then when people get bored, they come back and start something else, So it's kind of a weird place like that. You've got a lot of people that want to do things, but everybody's very independent minded about it. And so they just kind of do their own thing. We never sit around and think about how to make money to do something or how to be professional about it. We just simply go out and do crazy stuff sometimes. A lot of people, I think, get involved because of boredom, from the area. Yeah.
Boredom for, if you allow it to be, can be a great fertile ground for creativity.
Yeah, exactly. Like the times right now.
Yep. So we met for burlesque. It was clear to me when you got on stage with Jen for rehearsals that you really enjoyed performing, because you lit up like a little kid pretending to be this pussycat.
Yep.
Yep. And I didn't even know that you were an artist back then. I just thought you were Jen's husband, and oh great, you're getting involved.
No, yeah, I dabbled in performance art back in I took a performance art history course back in undergraduate at college, and a part of that class we actually had to do a performance piece at the end, which was so-so. But later on, I had that big birthday book of astrological signs, and I read it about October 15th, which is my birthday. The quote for the day is "All the world's a stage," and on top of that, I was born on the same day as Oscar Wilde, I think, and realized that it was something that sort of came natural to me. This performance aspect of my life. In graduate school, I took that on, had the opportunity several times. Every year they had this, every semester even, they had this diversity in the arts performance night where it was primarily like that. And they were just like, we've got a stage, we've got a light, do you want to do something? And it started about just me simply doing, what I was doing was basically charades. Name that movie in a sense. It sort of started out of that. And instead of actually trying to suggest what the movie was based on the title, I would sit there and act out the entire movie, like mime it out. just people thought it was like loony and kind of crazy because they had no clue what I was doing.
which sounds beautiful in its own way.
Yeah, and I actually really loved it. I really loved doing that stuff back then, but haven't really gotten into too much after that, unfortunately. Yeah, and so this burlesque show, when it came up, it was sort of a harkening back to that. Yeah, certainly when I get up on stage, I sort of do it the way method acting, I guess, in a sense, where you just pretend that you are that thing, that you are. You can't really see the audience because you've got a light on you. And so you sort of just do whatever, whatever comes naturally. So it's great to shock people too,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going through the years, starting with you let me know where you were at that time artistically. I don't think you were teaching anything back then, were you?
I was teaching part-time, probably like, that was a gap of time when I got fired from my teaching job at Lyco. Maybe got fired, I'm not sure. And I got a job as an industrial printer for about 2 years, and maybe I was still working that job. After that job, I got laid off, spent an enormous amount of time basically laid off. The next fall, I was working as a kindergarten autistic support aide for about a year. Got too sick from that. About that time, then I got hired back at Lycoming College. And then from there, I started teaching at Bucknell, Bloomsburg, Susquehanna. I taught a class there once. I'm a professional adjunct now. Yeah.
Nice. So you're picking up a little scratch from each of those education.
Yeah. And I also have a part-time job now as a Makerspace attendant. They opened up a Makerspace over at Penn College. And I run it, but they only have 25 hours a week on that one. Yep.
Well, you're going full steam ahead then right now.
Yeah, I've got a lot of variety, and it's unfortunately nothing solid though, And right now, it's everything's slacking off a bit. We don't know what things are going to be happening in the fall.
Right.
But that's the way I live right now. I save up money for the summer to live off the summer months when they're slim, and then when I'm in the falls, when I'm the most busiest usually. Yeah.
So a big part of your life, well, obviously art is the focus of your life, but a big part of your life later became your current wife. How did you meet her? How did this happen?
I moved out, moved into my own apartment right across the street from Lycoming College, where I'm at today. And after that, we were already friends on Facebook, and neither of us know who friended who first, but she was a graphic designer in Vietnam, and it was like, I don't know. So one night I was making sauerkraut, all right, and I posted a picture of it on Instagram or something, or no, on Facebook, and she liked it. She was only one of five people that liked the photo, and because of it, I was like, I wonder if she knows how to make kimchi. Because I was into this fermentation thing for a bit. And so I asked her, and she got right back to me, like right away practically, and rattled off the recipe. And I did it sort of apologetically because I only thought kimchi was a Korean thing, and I knew she was from Vietnam. And so I just honestly wanted to know how to make kimchi. And so, but no, all over Southeast Asia, they eat kimchi too. And she knew how to make it, and that's how we got talking as friends. And for about a month or so, and then she wanted to date me, and it was kind of dangerous because we were upping the relationship a little bit from friends when we started Skyping with each other. And it was like, uh-oh, now it's like pushing beyond. And then I thought, well, why not? We could date. Why? Because of the internet, we can date. You can date anyone in the world, like as long as they have internet service and you do. And so we started dating, and it was very, very serious pretty quickly. Just simply, even though we didn't see each other, we started dating each other, and she was telling me these things like this was supposed to happen. She's very, how do you say, like spiritual in her beliefs, and she believed that this was supposed to happen. She believes in afterlives, and that we met somewhere previous in a previous life. Well, I don't know. And so I just simply started dating her. And what it was doing was keeping me out of trouble. Because when I was single, I have this haphazard way of indulging too much when I'm single, you know, in the good life a bit. And so I sit around the house and I wonder what trouble I can get myself into a little bit. End up going out to the bars too much, mainly just, and mostly just drinking at home, just simply drinking when I work on my art. It sort of releases the creativity in you sometimes. So, but now that I was dating a girl who was 12 hours difference, she could only see me at nighttime. That's when she was up. And so it was a reason to stay home, a good reason to stay home at night. And she's so very dedicated, like I was being, to the relationship, that I literally leave my computer on all night long while I was sleeping, and she'd watch me sleep. Because she didn't have very much to do during the day. During the afternoon, their day starts at early in the morning. They get up at like 4 in the morning. They basically work and do things till about noon, and then they sleep throughout the midday because it's just too hot in Vietnam. And so simply, she just sits in a room all day and sits there with their video camera on me, watching me on Skype while I sleep at night. Yeah, and so I got used to doing that. Yeah.
That is adorable.
So the next thing we had to do was, obviously I had to come meet her. And I didn't realize, I watched it was funny, I watched a documentary on dating women in Southeast Asia after I came back, I think, and didn't realize what trouble I could have got myself into.
Absolutely. There, you know, when you're talking about long distance from different countries, and some countries that are not economically well off, that is something you have to be concerned with.
Yeah, there's a tendency for if you go to Southeast Asia, you meet somebody online, even carry on long relationships before you even actually meet them. But the stories in that documentary were about basically people getting hijacked when they went there. Went there, fell for the story, fell in love, met the family, and in a way they were like, the family was like, okay, now you want to marry our daughter, you know, so you're going to have to pay us $2 million or something like that, you know. Or, you know, or they'll hold you hostage. I mean, they picked me up from the airport. Nobody speaks English in Vietnam very much, at least not a lot. Just mainly in the big city, but where they took me, not a single person. And, you know, so I was like, I was in it for the ride. I have a tendency to do that, though, you know, just jump off and see what happens. Ever since I went to Peru a few years earlier, I went to on a 29-day trip with my friends to the Amazon jungle, and then we went to Machu Picchu and Iquitos and all those places. And I was always nervous about going to foreign countries that didn't speak English. And then after that trip, I was like, oh, I can do this, you know? And so that's what made me want to go. And of course, when we met up in person, I saw that she grew up on a farm. They had chickens and they had tree fruit, a lot like the way I grew up. And so we had, all of our interests were the same pretty much. And we realized we had everything in common.
Yeah. Not just kimchi.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, though, I was just thinking about having a conversation with somebody from around the world. I had another girl that once friended me on Facebook, too, that was from the Philippines. And that was the only person that ever actually, and I usually delete those too when they friend you. But she was sort of somebody that was generally looking for a relationship, looking for a way to get in the country. And so it wasn't really like that, because Eva had lots of guys after her. And so it was kind of annoying to me in a weird way. It was like there were so many guy friends from around the world that she had that it was like, it was just weird. It was just like, oh, I don't know about this. You know, but honestly, we had so much in common. When I went there, we made art together. She's even more creative than me. She works 10 times harder than I do. So her ambition level's like way up. Yeah. And it's just like we just feed off of each other. Yeah.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. A chance to pull your leg. That's what that was. So
yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah. I'm a little gullible sometimes.
I'm a sarcastic guy, but I don't often expect it from others, and then I get taken aback, just like you.
Right. Yeah.
So now your work has been commissioned all over the place. When I met you, you know, you got during the burlesque stuff, and you were and then you got back into it. When did you start to travel around to commission your artwork?
Well, around that time, it was 2009 when I think I got my big break when I was working at an industrial screen printing job. The most important thing is, well, getting into a gallery in a sense. And it took a long time. It was through a friend that I went to graduate school with. He was teaching down in Richmond, Virginia. And he he said, hey, this gallery I'm with, this guy, John, he'd really like your work. If you send it to him. So I sent him a packet of my images of my work and my resume. And, you know, you never hear back from them when you do that. And so my friend, like maybe a year later or 6 months later or something, next time he saw me, he was like, oh, hey, did you ever hear back from John about that? And I was like, no, I never heard back about it. And he was like, oh, I'll have to go tell him something. Well, then another 6 months goes by and all of a sudden I get an email during the summer. And I think that was like 2009, maybe 2008. And the gallery contacted me and they said, hey, we're doing a show in 2 weeks. And we want to take on some of your work for it. You got to mail it down here right away. And I knew that was a test, you know, at least I thought it took it that way. So I sent work right down there, some prints, because it was like a low budget show, cheap art show sort of thing. And sent them some prints. They really liked the work. And so I made it upon myself to drive down there the next November and showed him a lot of stuff. And he took a lot of it, kept it for the gallery. Well, he does all the art fairs. The only way he makes money, and most of the way the galleries in other cities besides New York make money is through the art fairs. So he featured my work in New York at Scope, and I think that was 2009. Really, the biggest paintings I had. It was so exciting, and 2 of them sold on the last night, last hour of the last night.
That's awesome.
And from there, I got a little bit. You know, it was pretty exciting, and that's sort of I don't know. After that, it rolled for a while. You know, it's ups and downs, but through that connection, I made other connections and got into other galleries. As relationships with galleries fell apart, I picked up new galleries. It's a weird game. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the art versus commerce game. That's
yeah.
how it goes. And with art, when you're a freelancer, that's how life is.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting, but I got to know it quite a bit now, and I've been very lucky to be able to get into art fairs every year and or try to keep up with that. And you know, secret to that is just simply don't try to not burn any bridges.
Right. Yeah. Looking at your resume, you really, you know, you did a bunch of work until 2009, and after that it skyrocketed. So much stuff, and I guess it all stems from building that resume. Nope, my work has already been in this gallery here in New York. Oh, you saw it. Is that kind of how it went?
Yeah, sort of. I always try to create a lot of work, so even before I had any representation, or I was still making a lot of work. I think the Job Johnson project, that came about prior to that, but at the time I was getting some solo shows at art centers and things around central Pennsylvania, as far down as Kutztown and up in Wellsboro. And the Job Johnson project was fairly successful with that. It first started with the invite from a friend of mine that worked at the state. She worked for the down in Harrisburg for the what do they call the dome? Their Congress building or something. She was like a assistant to a politician or something like that. And she said how they have art exhibitions at the state capitol, and all you have to do is simply notify them, contact them about it, and they get back to you about it. And so they wanted to do a Job Johnson show there because it was art about Pennsylvania in a historical context. And so they said, all right, you need 24 pieces. At the time, I only had three Job Johnson works. So I cranked out 24 works in less than 4 months or something like that. Wow. Yeah. And I realized I only needed about 20. Yeah. And so that project took off. And at the same time, that was just a side project. I was still working on my other paintings because they were the contemporary world wasn't going to buy it. The Job Johnson was sort of a reaction to contemporary art. It was something that I wanted to be so old and out of place that it was, that it wouldn't. I kind of knew it wouldn't be accepted or even recognized in the modern art world, it's sort of a rebellious sort of thing against it in a sense. Yeah. I was also doing it to sort of poke fun at history in a sense, that a lot of history is really folklore. It's stories carried down from generations. Some of it's true, some of it's not based on fact really. Yeah,
Right.
it was stuff I was fascinated in too. I grew up with it. Yeah.
But talking about your litany of work in terms of where it's been commissioned, and then Job Johnson, you have a very articulated, it seems like, vision or series of visions. So if you could, as a dynamic artisan, visual artist, is that how you would put yourself?
Oh yeah. Well, in a sense, what I do is my work is based on the personal first and foremost. So it's a lot of the influences are it comes from personal. The influences are culture, folklore, healthcare. I'm interested in privilege and survival. So it's sort of based around those areas. The work itself isn't recognized necessarily for its formal characteristics. It's more recognized. What ties it together is more of its content. Because I tend to work in painting, I work in sculpture, printmaking, and drawing. So it's a really combination of things. The reason to branch out even to Job Johnson was because I wanted to go in that direction. I wanted to make this whole series about specifically about folklore. I was interested in all these local stories. And so I created an alter ego to do that for me, to be able to go in that direction and still keep working the modern work I do. But my work is very schizophrenic almost. I make these maximalist paintings, which are, in me, it's the way that the internet is, in a sense, that you can flash from one idea to the next, and I try to put it all into one painting at the present time that I'm making the painting. And other than that, I've come up with these other ideas to make work. The credit card houses was a big project where I was making scale models of houses from the local area that were being torn down. I lived right around the Williamsport Hospital, and they were demolishing houses all around that area since 2009. The housing market collapse and all that. And I started making these scale models of houses out of credit card applications that I've saved up since 1997. I love found objects. So, it's like when I started getting these credit card applications, I wanted to do something about them, to get back at the companies that were sending them to me. As soon as I graduated college, we were just getting 2 a week, I think, and so it was something I couldn't deny, couldn't pass up. And eventually then the housing market collapsed. I had an idea for it, something to pull together. Yeah. So I make those, and then I also use other found materials to make pieces that sort of reference cultural and sometimes political and particularly healthcare with the church that I made as well, the church that I made out of my own pill bottles. Yeah. They also deal with personal elements because it's like the reason I had pill bottles is because I live with ulcerative colitis, and I take on average 5 pills a day. Since 2001, since I was diagnosed with it. Yeah.
What was it you're diagnosed with?
Ulcerative colitis. It's like Crohn's disease, or the general category is inflammatory bowel disease. Yeah.
So
basically,
not fun stuff.
Yeah. You basically bleed when you.
Oof.
Yeah, it's not pretty, but it's something that it's not talked about too much because people are embarrassed about it usually that have it. So I'm sort of I sort of think of myself as an advocate for it.
Good.
Yeah.
So what, if you could possibly synthesize it into one statement, what would you say your artistic vision is?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's the toughest part. Well, it's simply my vision. It stems from my own personal inspiration. And like I said, that inspiration is also infused with culture, folklore, healthcare, and survival, most importantly. Yeah, it's really tough with mine, but just simply because I throw everything in there. I mean, I throw everything in the kitchen sink as well. Like it's like when I'm working on a painting, I'll be everything that I'm influenced by will sort of feed into it some way. If I happen to be right now, I'm obsessed with Prince and also thinking about the dead Kennedys as far as music, and been watching films by David Cronenberg lately. So that sort of finds its way into the work. And at the same time, I'm thinking of political things that are happening in the news. Prior to the COVID-19, the epidemic, in a sense, I was thinking about privilege and rich people versus poor people, ideas, and all of that sort of comes together in the same painting. I'll actually put it all in there. I'll have maybe one general theme for the painting, but then and then just enter into it from all different angles. The last painting I did, the one that I showed you, was the Prince riding the tiger, and that was a collaborative with my wife. So we put that under NGUYEN Johnson Company. But with that painting, I was the one that sort of developed the idea for that painting in particular. Her original image was a princess riding a tiger. The tiger represents me in her eyes because it's my zodiac from Chinese zodiac. I'm a tiger, and she's sort of represented by the princess. So I use that as the main thing that ties the painting together. Put that image into it. And then on top of that, I build up, well, the tiger's moving in a certain direction. And I believed it as a wishful thinking for her life, in a sense. So I also added things that had to do with her past, growing up in Vietnam, as well as things for the future, that she wants to be a fashion designer. So you've got images of Versace, you've got images of different fashion designers that are painted in the background. Along with a few motifs that I use in all the paintings, like flowers is a common one. The only reason I put flowers in the paintings is because they're just so messy and ugly that when you put flowers in it, makes them look beautiful. So if people don't have anything to say about the painting at all, they'll be like, oh, there's some very beautiful flowers. My mom once said that once when she saw them. It's the only thing she had to say about them.
So keeping your audience in mind.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. And but other than that, that's how the general theme sort of works. Right now, I'm working on a painting that has this in it, which is this was an idea that was based on a Dead Milkmen song. This one song that was about a woman who had dollar signs in her eyes, and she was so blind she couldn't see anything because she was all she saw was money. In a sense.
Dead Milkmen or Dead Kennedys?
Dead Milkmen, okay. Actually. Yeah. And so, dollar signs in the eyes. So I imagine what would happen if you had skulls that were, people that were born with no eyes, but they had these sort of dollar signs embedded into their skull. So they were blind and all they could see was money, in a sense. And so it sort of came out of that idea. Working at the Makerspace, I had to learn how to 3D print. So this is actually a 3D print. So I went directly from the idea to the final product really quickly.
Wow.
It took about 36 hours to print, but I printed it physically, and it was a lot easier to make that way. Originally, I was going to cast it out of clay and using a skull as well and plaster, but I was able to 3D print it, so it's very nice. Then I also used, I did the same thing with the painting. So I added the skulls in the painting, which you can, if I tilt over that way, you can kind of see it in the background there. It's pretty big. It's 6 feet by 4 feet that I'm working on. And I screen printed that into the background. And I started layering images from both sides of the painting. I work on this frosted mylar. So you can paint all the details on it first, flip it over, and then put all the background colors in, and then flip it over and work on the front. And it makes the images look very flat. Yeah, it's a very nice look. Yeah.
What is your process generally? Do you come up with an idea first, or are you more of a hands-on, visceral, you just start doing something and then the ideas come about, or is it a mixture of everything?
It's actually a bit of both. Either I'll start with the idea. A lot of times when I create the sculptures, I begin with ideas. Like I have this idea in my head to construct a large church out of pill bottles, and since the pill bottles are amber and clear, you could project light through it. And so I had that idea, and I eventually built it. So it works that way a lot of times with sculptures. With painting, I tend to work the opposite. I might start with some little general thing I want to put into a painting, but I'll just start putting stuff into a painting, working on it, tiny little brushes a lot of times, and just add stuff to areas, as I'm working. It's sort of a live conversation with what's happening in the present moment. So.
You had referenced your art as being rather schizophrenic. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
There is a thing that is completely synchronistic in my world right now, and you talking about this. And to be fair, this was brought about by preparing for you four artists today, looking at your work, and then just allowing my creative mind to flow and get curious about different things. But I was actually looking for something entirely different. I think it was sociopolitically related when I happened upon this article, and I was like, this is for Jeremiah's interview. So this is from a website called idealart.com. That's IDEELART.
Mm-hmm.
And the article is called The Week in Abstract Art - Patterns and Randomness. And this is from October 20th of 2016. It doesn't list a writer, so I'm assuming this is a aggregate blog. So, but I'm just going to read, I guess the whole thing. It's probably take me 2 minutes. But there are certain points that are just spot on with this conversation. And then another point that's more of the socioeconomic thing, sociopolitical thing that I was trying to research. Revelation is often associated with abstract art. Sometimes a revelation inspires an artist to begin working. Other times, a revelatory moment lets an artist know a work is done. Viewers frequently experience revelations in the presence of abstract art, sometimes intellectually, sometimes viscerally, as in the sudden awareness of a different state of mind. Psychiatrists believe one of the early symptoms of schizophrenia is when a person begins interpreting delusions as revelations, called apophenia. This phenomenon arises when one begins interpreting randomness as a pattern. Randomania, the opposite of apophenia, is when you actually do experience a revelation, but you confuse it for delusion, or when a pattern does exist, but you fail to notice it. Between these two extremes is agenticity. According to Michael Shermer, founder of the Skeptic Society, agenticity is the tendency to infuse patterns with meaning, intention, and agency. In other words, the pattern is real but meaningless, yet we assign it meaning. Strangely, we sometimes experience all three when we look at abstract art. We fail to notice the patterns or perceive patterns where there are none, or assign meaning unintended by the artist. Is it strange that these behaviors are associated only with mental illness? They could easily also be related to inspiration, creativity, and genius. We say, bring on the patterns, the revelations, and the assigned meaning. Here are 5 current abstract art exhibitions that challenge the definitions of pattern and randomness. So then they talk about some art. But the socio-political thing that I was looking for was articulated in this one passage of called apophenia. This phenomenon arises when one begins interpreting randomness as a pattern. So this was, there are lots of people that their knee-jerk reaction to any news is some kind of conspiracy theory, trying to find something like intentional behind something. Mm-hmm. Randomania, the opposite of apophenia, is when it's ... you confuse it for delusion, or when a pattern does exist, but you fail to notice it. More often than not, I'm perplexed by people that are unable to question authority at all. And you can see the pattern throughout your life of dysfunctional authority, the way it functions. Mm-hmm. And so many people need to feel like the world makes sense and is secure and everything's in order, so they never question authority.
Right.
Whereas the reality, the truth is that there's a mixed bag of this stuff going on all the time, which is also what this person is saying is the foundation for really good art. Would you agree? What are your thoughts on what was written there?
Oh yeah, I sort of agree with it. In a sense, that it is sort of the foundation for good art. That you can either find logic and randomness. A lot of times we just leave that up to the viewer. Artists don't necessarily have the same intentions that the viewers take into it, but to be sort of casual about it, we're sort of open to other people's interpretations a lot of times. Otherwise, that's probably the commercial hint at selling a painting. When you see somebody, I tend to take it from I'll make a painting and I'll hear somebody talk about it, and generally just allow them to go with the direction that they're going with it, like for that purpose and reason. I'm not sure about the. Sometimes there's meaning behind it. Sometimes the artist is trying to create meaning behind it. Sometimes they're just making it up, and they're not sincere about it. And there's different ways to go about it. What's most important is to find to understand if they seem to be being true to themselves.
Jeremiah, thank you so much for giving me your time. This has been
absolutely. Yeah, and I think that goes with a lot of things. Oh yeah, you too.
Jeremiah, thank you so much for giving me your time.
Rosy, absolutely.
Face. I love it. Yeah, great to see your face again, man.
Thank you, brother. You too.
Right, your beautiful, rosy, smiling face. I love it.
Thanks.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
All right, bye.
Bye.